Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The tremors grew stronger, and she felt her heart race. The sound of shouts and footsteps became a blur as she searched for something solid to grab onto. In her panic, her eyes landed on a man standing nearby. He was tall, dressed in an immaculate suit, but his expression mirrored hers, a mix of confusion and fear. He seemed completely out of place in the chaos. His eyes met hers for a brief moment, and in that instant, something compelled her to move toward him. For a moment, it felt like time stood still. The ground beneath them shook violently, but their grip remained firm. In the middle of the chaos, their hands clasped together felt like the only thing that made sense. The man's hand was warm, strong, and oddly comforting in the midst of everything. The city slowly started to come back to life. As the aftershocks faded, people began to stand up, looking around, some cautiously stepping out into the open, while others began helping the injured. Sarah and Liam stood there for a moment, neither willing to break the silence. The air was thick with uncertainty, but the bond they shared for those few seconds remained. As the sound of sirens began to fill the air, both of them finally released their grip on each other, but the connection lingered between them. Sarah looked at him, unsure of what to do next. She had just met this man, yet it felt like they had been through something together that they would never forget. They turned toward the nearest cafe, the world around them slowly returning to normal, but something had shifted in both of them. In that brief moment of shared fear, of holding on to each other, they had found something neither of them expected. And though they didn't know it yet, this was the beginning of something neither would be able to walk away from. After a few moments of standing outside the cafe, trying to absorb the shock of the earthquake, Sarah and Liam finally walked inside together. The warm air inside felt like a sudden contrast to the cold, trembling streets they had just left behind. It was quiet now, with only the sound of clinking cups and soft music playing in the background. As they sat down at a small table by the window, Sarah noticed how everything felt a little surreal. She had just met this man, but somehow, it felt like they had already known each other for much longer. And just like that, Sarah found herself looking forward to something she hadn't expected. As they finished their coffee and chatted about the strangest of events that had brought them together, she couldn't help but wonder, could this meeting, born from a moment of fear and uncertainty, be the start of something more? Time would tell, but for now, she was willing to find out. As they left the cafe together, Liam offered to walk her home. The evening was crisp, and despite the events of the day, there was a quiet calm between them. They walked in comfortable silence, both lost in their thoughts, neither of them willing to admit how much this moment meant. The next day, Sarah was already feeling a strange mix of anticipation and unease. After last night's conversation with Liam, she couldn't stop thinking about him. She had agreed to meet him again, but now that the time had come, she wasn't sure what to expect. Was this just a friendly conversation, or was there something more happening between them? The whole situation felt surreal, almost like it wasn't real. After all, how could something meaningful come out of a random earthquake encounter? She arrived at the small cafe where they had agreed to meet. As she stepped inside, she saw Liam already sitting at a table by the window, his usual calm demeanor now accompanied by a slight smile as he saw her approach. There was no earthquake to break the silence this time. It was just a quiet morning, and yet Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting could change everything. The conversation drifted into lighter topics after that, but the air between them had shifted. Sarah found herself laughing more easily, sharing stories she hadn't told anyone in a long time. For once, she didn't feel the pressure of her life weighing her down. She felt free. Free to be herself, free to explore this unexpected connection with Liam. They walked outside together, the crisp air of the morning greeting them as they stepped onto the busy street. Neither of them knew where this would lead, but in that moment, it didn't matter. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like maybe, just maybe, she was on the verge of something real. As they said their goodbyes and parted ways, Sarah couldn't help but feel that the connection between them was just the beginning of something much bigger. The earthquake had been the catalyst, But the journey ahead would be something neither of them could predict. But for now, she was willing to take the first step, one small leap of faith at a time. The days passed, and Sarah found herself thinking about Liam more often than she expected. Their second meeting had gone surprisingly well, and as the days turned into weeks, they continued to meet up, usually at the same small cafe where they had first talked. Each conversation felt more natural, and the connection between them deepened. They laughed, shared their thoughts, and slowly began opening up about their lives. Sarah about her struggles with work and her mom, and Liam about his life as a CEO, how he often felt trapped by the weight of expectations. What started as an unexpected bond after a traumatic experience was now becoming something more meaningful. One evening, after a long conversation about the pressures of their respective lives, Sarah found herself walking home with Liam again. The city had a different energy at night, with the lights of the skyline reflecting off the buildings and the streets buzzing with activity. Liam seemed a little different tonight. There was a hint of something more serious in his voice when he spoke, like he had something important to share. The evening air grew colder, and Sarah pulled her coat tighter around herself as they walked in silence. It wasn't awkward, though. It was comfortable, like they had reached an understanding without needing to speak any more words. She couldn't deny that what she felt for Liam was real. It wasn't just about the earthquake anymore, or even just the conversations they'd shared. It was more than that. She had never imagined that something so meaningful could come from a random encounter on the streets of New York, but here they were, walking side by side. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. They reached her apartment building, and Sarah turned to face Liam. He smiled, his eyes holding a soft sincerity she had come to recognize. "I'll see you soon, right?" he asked, his voice steady. Sarah smiled back, her heart beating a little faster. "Yeah, I think I'd like that." As Liam walked away, Sarah stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him disappear into the night. She couldn't quite explain it, but she felt like something important was happening between them. It wasn't just the excitement of a new relationship or the chemistry they shared. It was something deeper, something real. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt hopeful about the future, about what was to come. Inside her apartment, Sarah sat down on the couch, her thoughts racing. She had spent so much of her life guarding her heart, afraid to let anyone in. But now, with Liam, it felt different. Maybe this was the beginning of something she had never allowed herself to imagine. Maybe she was finally ready to take a chance on something real. It had been a few weeks since that conversation, and Sarah couldn't help but feel the shift that was slowly happening between her and Liam. The tension that had once hovered in the air between them had softened into something more comfortable. Every time they met, it felt like they were stepping closer to something real. Still, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the edge of something she wasn't sure she was ready for. One afternoon, they met for lunch at a quiet restaurant on the Upper East Side. The day was bright and sunny, and Sarah noticed how much more relaxed she felt with him now. As they sat down across from each other, Liam was already smiling at her, as if he had something on his mind. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the conversation shifting to lighter topics as they enjoyed their meal. Sarah felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. Maybe it was the way Liam was so patient with her, or how he never pushed her to be anything she wasn't ready to be. Whatever it was, it made her feel like she could finally breathe easy. As they finished their lunch and stood up to leave, Liam turned to Sarah with a gentle smile. "I'm glad we're having this conversation," he said, his voice soft. "It feels like we're getting somewhere." "Yeah," Sarah agreed, smiling back. "It really does." They walked out of the restaurant together, the sun still shining down on the bustling streets of New York. For the first time in a while, Sarah didn't feel afraid of what was coming. She didn't know what the future held, but with Liam by her side, she was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was ready to find out. As they said their goodbyes and parted ways, Sarah felt a quiet excitement building inside her. This was just the beginning, but it was a beginning she was starting to look forward to. The uncertainty was still there, but she felt like, for the first time, she was no longer walking through life alone. The next few days felt like a whirlwind for Sarah. Everything was changing, and yet, she felt strangely calm in the midst of it all. Her relationship with Liam was growing in ways she hadn't expected, and she was starting to realize that what they had wasn't just a passing connection. It was something deeper, something that she wasn't sure she was ready for, but she also couldn't ignore it anymore. They had been spending more time together, sharing more of their lives, and with each passing day, the bond between them seemed to strengthen. One evening, after spending a quiet day at the park, they sat down on a bench, watching the sun dip below the skyline of the city. The cool evening air brushed against their skin, but neither of them seemed to mind. Liam, who had been quiet for most of the afternoon, finally spoke, his voice soft but clear. They sat there in silence for a few moments, the sound of the city in the background, but everything felt distant. In that moment, it was just the two of them, and the world felt like it had paused, giving them a chance to breathe, to take it all in. As the evening went on, they walked through the park, talking about everything and nothing at all. The uncertainty that had once filled Sarah's mind began to fade, replaced by something more comforting. It wasn't that she had all the answers, but with Liam by her side, she felt like maybe she didn't need them. Maybe it was enough to simply take the next step, trusting that whatever happened, they could face it together. When they finally reached Sarah's apartment, Liam turned to her with a soft smile. "I'll see you soon," he asked, his voice low but filled with hope. They shared a quiet moment before Liam turned to leave, walking down the street with a confident stride, while Sarah stood there, watching him go. She didn't know what the future would bring, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe it wasn't something to fear. As she closed the door behind her and leaned against it, a smile tugged at her lips. She was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that with Liam, she wasn't walking alone. The next few days were a blur for Sarah. She couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and nerves as her relationship with Liam continued to grow. They spent more time together, talking about everything from their dreams and fears to the small details of their daily lives. Yet, despite all the time they had spent together, Sarah still couldn't shake the feeling that something was holding her back. She had begun to let her guard down, but the fear of getting hurt again still lingered, and it wasn't something she could ignore. One evening, they were at Liam's apartment, sitting on the balcony with a bottle of wine, enjoying the quiet of the night. The city lights twinkled in the distance, and the hum of traffic was just a soft background noise. Liam had been unusually quiet all evening, which didn't go unnoticed by Sarah. The evening stretched on, and they sat together on the balcony, the quiet between them now comfortable rather than heavy. Sarah felt a weight lift off her shoulders, as if she had finally admitted something she had been avoiding for far too long. As the night went on, Sarah realized that while the road ahead might be uncertain, she didn't have to face it alone. Liam was right beside her, offering his support and patience. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like maybe, just maybe, she could let herself believe in love again. The days after their conversation felt lighter, more natural. Sarah found herself feeling more at ease with Liam, her heart no longer heavy with the fear of moving too fast. They continued to spend time together, each moment deepening the connection between them. It was not without its bumps, but they learned to navigate those together. They talked more openly, laughed harder, and slowly, they began to build a rhythm that was uniquely their own. One afternoon, a couple of weeks later, Liam invited Sarah to a charity gala he was attending, one that had been on his calendar for months. She had been hesitant at first. The idea of a high society event made her feel out of place, but Liam had reassured her that it wasn't about fitting in, it was about supporting the cause. So she agreed. She picked out a dress, took a deep breath, and prepared herself for what felt like the first real step into Liam's world. As they entered the grand ballroom together, Sarah immediately felt a rush of nerves. The room was filled with well-dressed people, most of whom seemed to know each other, exchanging polite pleasantries and laughter. The chandeliers above them sparkled, casting a warm light over the guests, and Sarah couldn't help but feel a little out of her element. Liam, noticing her discomfort, placed a hand on the small of her back and leaned in. Sarah nodded, grateful for the reassurance, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. She stuck close to Liam, letting him lead her through the crowd, introducing her to a few of his colleagues and friends. Each conversation felt like a blur, but there was one thing that stood out: how Liam never left her side. Even in the midst of all the socializing, he kept returning to her, checking in, making sure she was okay. Then, the moment came. The auctioneer took the stage to announce a special auction item that would go toward the foundation's work, an exclusive art piece donated by a renowned artist. The room went quiet, and Liam stood with the others, listening intently. Sarah noticed how the focus shifted, how people began to bid enthusiastically, but something caught her eye. Amid all the commotion, she saw Liam glance at her, his expression softening as he walked over to her. Sarah looked up at him, unsure what he meant. "What?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the crowd. Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't know why those words hit her the way they did. Maybe it was because of the way he said them, so sure, so confident. Or maybe it was because, for the first time, she realized that she wasn't just a guest in Liam's life, but that she had a place in it. That the world they were building wasn't about fitting in. It was about creating something real together. The rest of the evening passed in a haze. Sarah felt a shift inside her, something that had been slowly building over time. She wasn't just a woman in a room full of strangers anymore. She was Liam's partner, his equal. And with that realization came a wave of gratitude for the journey they had started together. As they left the gala later that night, walking through the quiet streets, Sarah felt lighter than she had in a long time. The world was still uncertain, still full of unknowns, but with Liam by her side, it didn't feel as overwhelming. It felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. "I don't know where this is going," Sarah said softly, as they reached her apartment door. "But I do know that whatever happens, I want to face it with you." Liam looked at her, his eyes filled with warmth and affection. "We'll figure it out together, Sarah. One step at a time." As she closed the door behind her that night, Sarah realized that no matter where their journey took them, she had already found something worth holding on to. The weeks that followed were filled with a sense of quiet comfort. Sarah and Liam's connection continued to deepen, and with each passing day, the fear that had once held Sarah back seemed to melt away. She found herself looking forward to their time together more than anything, feeling a kind of peace she hadn't experienced in years. They were no longer just two people trying to figure each other out. They were partners, growing together, facing life's challenges side by side. One evening, after spending the afternoon in Central Park, laughing and talking about their dreams for the future, Liam turned to Sarah as they sat on a bench overlooking the lake. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the water, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. There was no rush, no pressure, just the two of them, in this moment, together. The moment felt like a quiet promise between them, something simple but meaningful. There were no grand declarations, no fireworks, just two people, standing at the beginning of something real, ready to face whatever came next. In the days that followed, their lives continued to unfold with a kind of natural ease. They spent weekends exploring the city, cooking dinner together, sharing their fears and dreams. They still had their challenges, but now they faced them as a team. Sarah no longer felt like she was navigating life alone. With Liam, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. One evening, after a particularly wonderful dinner they had cooked together, Liam took Sarah's hand and led her to the living room. The soft glow of the candles illuminated the room, and the music they had played in the background faded as Liam turned to her with a serious look on his face. The room seemed to pause in that moment, as they stood there, holding each other, knowing that the journey ahead would not always be easy, but it would always be worth it. Together. And so, their story continued. With love, with trust, and with the kind of bond that only grows stronger with time. They had both taken chances, faced their fears, and found something real. And in each other, they found not just a partner, but a home.